me know when you want. Did I begin?
Good.
Attendees are coming in. We have about
Folks
60.
that are streaming in.
Yeah.
You let me know.
We're up to about 89. We're up to 94. I'm going to turn off my camera now. Get back.
Does that look okay? Can you see that okay?
Fantastic.
And if, just really quick, if I do this, can you still see it okay?
I'm seeing your whole screen.
Perfect. And if I advance the slides, you can see it okay?
I'm not seeing the slides advance.
Okay. How about if I do that?
There you go.
Not exactly what I wanted, but okay, so you can see that okay?
I can, correct.
I'm not sure what happened here, but
All right, fantastic. So I'm gonna get started.
let's do it.
All right, let me find what I need. There it is. So ironically, first of all, I want to say welcome to the next installment of the Santa Clara County Domestic Violence Conference. And I apologize for our late start, but we had some technical difficulties, ironically, during our technology-enabled webinar. But we think we have them fixed. And thank you for joining us this morning. This conference has been made possible, of course, by the Santa Clara County Office of Gender-Based Violence Prevention. And without them, this entire event this month would not have come to fruition. I'm Rachel McKenzie. I'm the managing attorney at the Pro Bono Project of Silicon Valley, and I am this year's Domestic Violence Conference chair. It is my pleasure to introduce this morning Adam Dodge. He's going to be presenting our second session, Technology-Enabled Domestic Violence, the Latest Trends and Impact. The objectives one hopes the audience can receive from this webinar is to explain an explanation in the current landscape of technology-enabled abuse, including 3 emerging trends as a result of the pandemic, as well as being able to identify 3 reasons why domestic violence victims are at high risk of technology-enabled abuse. Oh, and finally, to recognize common forms technology-enabled abuse takes. I know in my line of work, this is very interesting and very exciting to have this information. Our presenter today is Adam Dodge from endtab.org. That is endtab.org. And as the founder of endtab, standing for Ending Technology-Enabled Abuse. Adam's work is characterized by his dedication to addressing the existing and future threats posed by technology to victims of crime and gender-based violence. He's written extensively on technology-enabled abuse, non-consensual pornography, co-authored a domestic violence advisory on the emerging threats of deepfakes, and created the first resource guide for victims of non-consensual deepfake pornography. Adam spends a great deal of his time delivering innovative technology abusive trainings to victims and victim serving organizations and government agencies around the world. It's my honor to introduce Adam and to point out that he will be taking questions throughout the presentation. Please use the Q&A chat, or I'm sorry, the Q&A feature. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Adam.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yes, so the technical, you were being very kind. The technical difficulties were all on my end. I do a ton of these trainings, and of course, it just all the bottom fell out on me. I had to switch computers, and normally my slides fill up the entire screen, but for whatever reason, the screen share is not allowing us to do that. So hopefully this all works out well. Very excited to be here today. This is a topic that I'm particularly passionate about. I left a job that I love to focus on this full time because I was very, I guess just persuaded. I was persuaded to do it because I felt like those of us in the victim serving professions, whether that be attorneys, whether we're a DA or a public defender or in private practice or work for a nonprofit, or if you're in law enforcement or social services or a nonprofit, I didn't feel like we were confident or had access to the right resources or skills to address or act when abuse goes digital. And that would frustrate me quite a bit because, at least in my experience working at Laura's House, which was a gender-based violence organization in Southern California, technology had become pretty ubiquitous in most of my cases. And while I had a pretty good handle on addressing or understanding the ways domestic violence or gender-based violence was occurring offline, when the case would go digital, if there was somebody felt like they were being followed or their device was being tracked or somebody knew information about them that they shouldn't, or they're getting harassed anonymously online, I didn't feel like I had a great handle on how to help and what to do. And so I began to, and I'll go ahead and advance the slides here. So I began to collaborate with people in information security and cybersecurity and in the technology sector to really develop and try to understand how not to be an expert, because that I don't think that's what you need to be able to act when abuse goes online, but just to be tech savvy and really a niche of tech savviness that focuses on assisting victims of crime and victims of gender-based violence. My pronouns are he, him. I assume most of y'all have pretty deep backgrounds in working with victims and survivors of domestic violence and gender-based violence and sexual violence. But just want to issue a content warning in case something, we are going to be talking about violence and gender-based violence and online sexual violence. And if that is activating for you, please feel free to mute or step away from the screen or do whatever you need to do to take care of yourself. And as was mentioned, questions are welcome to go ahead and issue. I'll be taking some breaks throughout the presentation to see if there have been any questions have been issued, but if not, we'll be able to answer them at the end as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started here. So, the thing I want to just address right out of the gate is that gender-based violence is innovating, and we need to follow suit. The ways in which people or perpetrators of gender-based violence are thinking up new ways to misuse technology to harm victims is pretty astounding. A lot of this technology, technology with some exceptions is not necessarily evil, and it's only when people misuse it or weaponize it to do harm or to use it as an extension of abuse that they were perpetrating offline. That's when we run into problems. So gender-based violence is, as I'm going to show you here in a second, is innovating, and we need to follow suit. We need to start. We need to get to a place, I think, as a community of victim-serving professionals and organizations where we are comfortable and savvy enough to meet victims of online and tech-enabled abuse where they are, and not be held back by some lack of resource or lack of skill building that we don't have, because as we're gonna go through here, the folks that we're serving, their lives, the victims that we're serving, their lives are as digital and as online as they've ever been ever in their lives. So we have to meet them where they are, and some of the ways in which this is just I just want to show you all some examples of the ways in which gender-based violence is evolving. So this is an app that came out last summer, actually, called the Deep Nude app, and it uses artificial intelligence, which is something that we rely on all the time for our apps and our smart speakers and things like that. But people are leveraging, if any of you have heard of deepfakes, which I'm going to touch on in a second, they're leveraging this technology to basically fetishize and sexualize women without their consent. And this is a good example. So not surprisingly, a man created this app called Deep Nude, and he called it an X-ray app. And essentially what you see here on the photos on the lower right, on the left is a selfie a woman took in her bathing suit or underwear. And then to the right, if you feed this photo into the Deep Nude app and press a button, it digitally disrobes her with startling authenticity and accuracy. It's blocked out obviously here, but what happened was this AI, this artificial intelligence mind, or this deep neural network, basically reviewed hundreds of thousands of nude images and was able to accurately recreate what it believed this woman would look like based on her dimensions when she's wearing clothes. She doesn't have to be in a bikini. She can be, fully clothed, and this will still work. The reason I said technology is not necessarily evil, but I mentioned that there are some exceptions. This is the exception, because this is a violence against women app. This app does not work on men. If you put a photo of a man into this app, it won't work. Now you look at this and you might say, well, people have had Photoshop for a while. Photoshop's been around for a long time. You could create a fake nude of somebody. What's the big deal? And the big deal is this just makes it that much easier. And it's like taking somebody who's extremely skilled at Photoshop and putting it in the hands of somebody who's completely unskilled and unsophisticated and letting them do it in an instant. And you look at things like this, and what's concerning, or what jumps out to me when I look at things like this, is that this could be weaponized in a way to create non-consensual pornography or image-based abuse in a really realistic way, because the subject or the victim of the photo is in a place that they may frequent, or that looks like their house or their car or their school or their couch in this circumstance. So that just adds to the authenticity, and really, I think, showcases that online violence is very gendered, and it's very slanted towards targeting women as victims. And as I mentioned before about deepfakes, for those of you who have heard of them or have not heard of them, deepfakes are something that rose to prominence right at the end of 2017, beginning of 2018, where it's a face swapping software platform or algorithm that uses artificial intelligence, again, to take photos of a victim and basically extract their face and then map it onto somebody else in a video and make it appear as if the victim is now the person participating in that video. Not surprisingly, it's been weaponized to target women by inserting them without their consent into pornography. Here on the right are screenshots from 2 deepfake pornography videos. You have Emma Watson on the upper right, who is from the Harry Potter movies. That is her face. That is not her body. That is the body of a adult film actress. And if you played this video, she would proceed to disrobe and engage in a sex act. And it looks like it's Emma Watson engaging in that sex act. Same with the photo below. You have Daisy Ridley, who is in all the recent Star Wars movies. Again, not her body, but her face, and it's been mapped on there. A lot of folks are worried about deepfakes as a threat to fake news or to subvert democracy by interfering with the electoral process. But make no mistake, this is a violence against women issue. We are not dealing with their, California has a law against electoral interference with regard to deepfakes, but there is no electoral interference. That's not really happening. What is happening is deepfake pornography is proliferating rapidly. Of all the deepfakes that exist on the internet, 98% of them are pornographic, and 100% of those target women. So these things are, I'm sharing this just to give you sort of a sense of how emerging or really cutting edge technology is really quickly misused and, as I've said, weaponized to engage in acts of gender-based violence, more often than not targeting women. I think deepfakes do a really good job of that. Now, if I can, let's see if this will work. I'm gonna play you a video, not that video, but a video that will demonstrate how the technology works and give you a sense of what these videos could look like. So this is, if this video will play for us, and with my luck, it won't. Let's see here. Well, I'll try to play it in a little bit. That's such a letdown. I swear, folks, this doesn't really happen to me. But, you know, deepfakes are everywhere. And the last thing I'm going to say about deepfakes before I move on to tech-enabled domestic violence and the pandemic and current trends is that a lot of people are really and this is where I think the violence against women and gender-based violence is really undermined, in the sense that everybody's worried about fake news in the elections, as I mentioned. And so the solution that a lot of people are focused on is detection. Okay, if we can detect deepfakes and immediately use some kind of software or artificial intelligence to immediately show that these things are not real, then problem solved, right? But it's that does not address the violence against women angle, because there are websites that get millions and millions of users and visitors and consumers of deepfake pornography content that are holding themselves as deepfake pornography websites. People, and this is where I struggle, because they could come up with a solution to deepfakes tomorrow that detects them and proves that they're fake immediately. And those deepfake pornography websites will not skip a beat. They will not lose users. They will continue, their growth will continue up and to the right, because people are not going to these sites because they believe it's Scarlett Johansson or Emma Watson actually engaging in these sex acts. They're going there because it takes a fantasy from their mind and it puts it on the screen. Much in the same way when this technology becomes so ubiquitous and easy to use, if you have a kid, let's say it's a man in college or in high school that has a crush on a girl and he fantasizes about her, now he can take this technology and actually take his fantasy and put it on his smartphone, so he could watch her engage in those sex acts, and he can share it with people. He can engage in some semblance of power and control. He can fetishize and sexualize her. He can share it. He can show it to other people. So that is the crux of the issue. And so what we really need to do is not so much focus on detection when we're talking about deepfakes and gender-based violence, but focus on accountability and holding those that are creating these things, these videos, and disseminating these videos, holding them accountable, which is much more challenging and much more difficult to do. If any of you ever have tangled with a technology platform before and tried to get them to take something down or provide data or respond to a subpoena, you know how difficult that is. And Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act also makes it very difficult, because it means that technology platforms are not legally responsible for what goes on their platform. So, you know, if somebody's getting bullied, somebody's child is getting bullied so badly that they cannot, that they start to have suicidal thoughts, or maybe they harm themselves and they're getting bullied on Facebook, and you report it to Facebook and say, please take this down. This is an impersonating account of my child. It's causing them emotional distress and they're trying to self-harm. And if Facebook ignored that request and allowed it to proliferate and did nothing, and basically let somebody do it, abuse this child in perpetuity, you can't sue. The parents can't sue Facebook for that. Facebook would just say, well, it's not us that's doing it, it's the person who created the account. So, and we're not legally responsible. So that's the challenge that we have right now with holding perpetrators of online abuse and online violence and tech-enabled abuse accountable. Is going through the tech platforms that are hosting this content or allowing the bullying or harassment to take place is a large challenge. So not trying to be a downer, just trying to really crystallize what exactly the current landscape is. It looks like we have some Q&A. So is whoever's monitoring that for us today, is there any questions that I can answer before I continue on?
Thank you, Adam. This is Julie.
Hey, Julie.
We've got a question regarding the deepfakes. Is there no law against deepfakes? Isn't that a form of identity theft?
Yeah, great question. So there are laws. So for example, California has 2 laws on the books with respect to deepfakes. One provides essentially a civil right of action to a victim whose likeness is used without their consent. This was supported by the Screen Actors Guild for actors and primarily actresses, because they are the ones being targeted with that, with a lot of the, at least initially they were being targeted. Now we're seeing private deepfakes really start to proliferate. And then we have an electoral interference law as well. Now here's the challenge. So, and California is on the cutting edge, right? Texas has a deepfake law. Virginia has a deepfake law, and they're working on a federal law. But other than that, we don't have any deepfake specific laws. Now, to your question about isn't this impersonation, I've talked to a lot of DAs about, and this is historically true, that legislation does not typically keep pace with technology. So we're stuck with shoehorning new ways and the sort of twisted ways people are using technology to cause harm and having to shoehorn it into existing laws. So exactly, you've got false impersonation or credible impersonation. Our non-consensual pornography law would not apply to deepfake pornography because it is not the victim's body parts that are being shown. And then, defamation, you could get into, there's a whole laundry list. I mean, if we sat around and sort of imagined the different ways in which deepfakes could be used. But right now, we don't have a law specific to that, and nobody has been charged to date with the dissemination or creation of deepfake pornography. So we don't have a law yet. I would love to see our state's non-consensual pornography law be amended to include artificial media, essentially, because it is still, even in this, gosh, this is going to turn into a deepfake presentation, and I apologize, but it's a fascinating subject. But the challenge, then this is the last thing I'm going to say on deepfakes, unless y'all have more questions. And I do a whole 2-hour presentation on this. But the other thing that drives me nuts about this is that a lot of folks will say, well, it's not real. So what's the harm to a woman who is falsely inserted into pornography without their consent? And when you talk to some victims, the damage, this still has yet to be studied, but they talk about that they don't really know what to make it. It gives them a sick feeling in their stomach. They feel sexualized and fetishized without their consent. They don't feel safe. They have emotional stress. They suffer from post-traumatic stress from these things. They suffer reputational harm. So the example I always give is if a 17-year-old high school student is walking down the hallway and sees a bunch of kids watching a video, and she looks over their shoulder and it's a deepfake pornography video featuring her, and she knows it's fake, and everybody watching it knows it's fake, and everybody who's getting this video forward to them knows it's fake. When she walks away, if you don't think she's affected by that, I would beg to differ. It's harmful. We just don't fully understand how harmful it is. And the best analogy, the most analogous situation was suggested to me by a mental health professional who said, well, look, this reminds me of a rape victim who was unconscious when they were assaulted, and it was filmed. And then they have to watch it and see that. There's a disassociation there, but it's still harmful. So I hope that answers your question. It's very frustrating, and I think the deepfake issue really does highlight the challenge, some of the challenge. One, it highlights the ways in which new technology is weaponized to harm victims. And then also highlights how we need to start thinking sort of outside the box a little bit about how we can hold people accountable by applying the laws that we have now, or restraining orders, if you're talking about, like a civil, a family law restraining order, or civil harassment order, or something like that.
Thank you, Adam. This is Carla, and there are just a couple more questions on this. And it's very much linked to what you were just talking about. Several people are noting how deeply disturbing this is, and that they weren't even aware to, the degree that it is happening. So this is some new information, but we have a question of whether there's any evidence to suggest that individuals who watch a lot of the deep fakes might go on to commit actual crimes, since it's almost like a gateway into acting out their fantasies, or if you've seen any research on that.
Great question. I've never heard that. That's a first for me. They're not that I know of. I think it's too new. And having a subject pool of people to interview, I think it's just too new. So not that I know of. Not that I know of. I mean, I'm really going to try to restrain myself from going too deep down the rabbit hole. But I'm going to say one more thing, and then I swear I'm going to move on. But another thing to think about here is the combinations of new technologies that are being used to harm folks. So in addition to deep fakes and all these different things, you go to websites like "this person does not exist" or generated.photos. And what you'll find when you go to these sites are hundreds of thousands of photos of people that do not exist, that were generated by artificial intelligence. And the challenge here is, and we're going to talk about this, because when I see that, a lot of people might think that's innocuous and no big deal. I immediately start looking at these advances in technology through the lens of, okay, how, because it's going to happen, so I'm not going to wait to be blindsided. How is this going to be weaponized to cause harm? And when I look at those photos, one thing that's really disturbing on these databases of fake photos is that they're creating photos of children. And so we're one pivot away from somebody taking a photo of a child and creating using deepfake technology to insert that child into a pornographic video onto the body of an adult performer who perhaps has a younger body that could match the child's face, okay? So now what you're looking at essentially is child sexual exploitation, or child sexual exploitative material, or child pornography, right? Except it's a victimless crime. It's morally reprehensible, but it's a victimless crime. And this is what I talk about when I do trainings for judges and district attorneys is, if you serve a subpoena and you get a terabyte of video of, let's say it's child pornography, we need to be thinking about whether or not it's real, because we already have people who are making the argument that, look, this is a victimless crime. I have a condition that I have a compulsion to watch these types of videos. This is a way I can satisfy that compulsion while not doing anything illegal. And so being aware, this is my whole deal, is being aware that this kind of technology exists and talking about it before we get whipsawed by it, right? You look at the way in which, for example, non-consensual pornography has proliferated to the point where 1 in 12 Americans identifies as a victim of non-consensual pornography or revenge porn. We don't like to say revenge porn because the motive isn't always revenge, but it's very catchy and finds its way into a lot of media articles and headlines. But everybody knows what revenge porn is now. I go to any presentation I do, people know, no one says, what's revenge porn? What are you talking about? But revenge porn or non-consensual pornography or image-based abuse has been around, I would argue, since the 1830s when the first camera became commercially available. Because even then, I could have taken a photo of my partner, let's say my wife, without her consent, of her in the nude, shared that photo without her consent to other people, with the understanding that it was to remain private. That's an act of and if I was doing it motivated by revenge because I was mad at her, then that's revenge porn. Well, that's the 1830s. So this has been around for so long. We've had cameras and Polaroid cameras and digital cameras. Why is it such a big deal now? Why do we see these huge, why does everybody know what it is, and why is there such a high number of victims in the United States? And it's because of technology. We went to digital cameras, and then you can upload that photo and share it with more people. You get to smartphones, and now I can take a video of my naked wife and I can share it with the world in 3 seconds. And guess what? You can never scrub that photo from the internet. It is going to exist in perpetuity, right? So it always will haunt that victim. Same form of abuse, but technology makes it, and I'm going to get into this, and I really need to move on and apologize, but technology makes it easier to perpetrate and makes the harm much, much greater. The order of magnitude of the harm is much greater. So, if I had a time machine when the internet was coming out, or social media was coming out, or smartphones were coming out, I would start to look at those devices as, okay, now how is this going to be weaponized to harm the victims that I serve? Well, revenge porn is starting to become an issue. Wow, this is like pouring gasoline on a fire. This is going to become prolific. Or, harassment or bullying. I mean, 6 in 10 teens identify as victims of cyberbullying now, and that's a huge number. And that's because when I was growing up, if I was bullied, when I went home for the day, the bullying stopped, and it didn't start again until I went to school. But now it's on a 24-hour cycle, which is why we have, since basically Facebook and Twitter and social media really started to become high volume, basically become very popular, you see suicide rates amongst teens just spiking massively. And so again, suicide, these issues existed before, it's just technology has an impact. And I think it's incumbent on us doing this work, working with victims in whatever capacity that we do, to really have a renewed, use a new lens when we look at technology. Yes, this is smart speaker, it's awesome, it's designed to help me, or this new tracking app helps me find where my car is parked by using my phone. But how can that be misused by somebody who's abusive in an intimate partner relationship? How can that be used to find the person's car or track them, or things like that, or listen to them without their consent? So these are the types of things. It's kind of gonna, if you commit to this, it's gonna kind of ruin the excitement around your technology for you. But I really think, because tech companies are not coming to save us. They're building these platforms, at least historically, they've been built to focus on user growth, not safety. And we're left to deal with the fallout. And that is certainly has been true with deepfakes and all these different things, that people that are creating them or open sourcing the technology are saying, well, yeah, we recognize that it can be used for harm, but we're not creating it to be harmful. And so people that download or use our software shouldn't use it to harm folks. And which is, as we all know, patently ridiculous, but that is the mindset of people that are creating this technology. For the most part, there are some good organizations, like IBM's pretty good about being really ethically mindful and ethical when they're developing new technology. Okay, I'm on slide 3, so I'm gonna keep moving here. There we go. All right, so the pandemic impact. We have to talk about the pandemic, right? And I think, especially for folks who work with DV survivors and DV victims, I think we can all recognize that domestic violence has risen to national prominence in a way that I think is meaningful during the pandemic, and people are covering it based on bullet point 1 here, which is that victims are now isolated with abusive partners, and people are seeing spikes in domestic violence because people in intimate partner violence relationships are now quarantining together, and there's no escape, and it's creating issues. So I think that's great, because I have another bone to pick with the way domestic violence is covered, and the way it's covered and how often it's covered. So I was really gratified to see that. The other aspect, though, that I don't think has received enough attention is that number 2, which is the pandemic has ushered victims and those seeking to harm them online. Now, I've never been to this conference before, but I have to believe that I would be presenting to you all in person if the pandemic wasn't going on. So it pushes us online. And as we know, victims are harmed where they are. And where they are is online and on their devices right now. So we don't have really strong statistics in the US to point to spikes in different forms of online abuse as a result of the pandemic, but other countries are starting, the UK and Australia and India are starting to come out with pretty powerful statistics around this, around spikes in cyber stalking and image-based abuse and things like that. And it makes sense, right? Because now to go to work, for a lot of folks to work or to go to school or to socialize or to date or to do all these different things requires them going online. And so it just, I think logically makes sense that if a victim of stalking or domestic violence or what have you is always online, then that's where they're going to be harmed. And that's certainly what I'm seeing. I don't provide direct client services anymore, but I do help out, pro bono if somebody reaches out to me. And we're seeing a lot of this, especially in high schools and colleges, because, and I don't know what the effect is here. I call it the troll effect. When somebody goes online on social media and they are suddenly emboldened to say horrible things to somebody that they would never say in person, right? They are emboldened to do that. Well, we're starting to see that concept play out in our schools because, for example, we're seeing kids women primarily so people are trying to solicit nude photographs from them. Just flat out, hey, would you sell me some nudes? Can I get some nudes from you? That we never saw in the classroom before, but because everything's online, the accountability factor goes down. They're more emboldened, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but these are the types of things that we're seeing. And so I know I'm talking about domestic violence today, but it really is sort of, a very well-rounded impact across different victimization types. And just to remember, in today's world, technology is required to survive and thrive. And if somebody cannot access their technology safely, does not have control over their devices of their accounts, or can't exist online without fear or limitation, then their ability to survive and thrive is greatly hampered. I mean, I think about how when I was doing a lot of domestic violence shelter work, we were trying to quickly help a domestic violence survivor in 45 days or whatever the shelter stay was, put them on a path to financial independence and safety and rebuild their lives and move to a safe place. Well, a lot of that now requires access to the internet and, on a smartphone and all these and email accounts and all these different things. And if they're not comfortable using those things or somebody's sabotaging them, then it makes our job almost impossible. And I don't think this probably doesn't surprise a lot of you, because if you think about it, think about all the ways in which our smartphones basically are the nexus of our lives, and we rely on them for everything. The icons on here, I think, really demonstrate how powerfully reliant we are on our devices. We use it to work out, to get directions to go somewhere, to pay for things, whether it's Venmo or credit cards or banking. We use it to work, to exercise, to meditate, to keep our calendars, to keep our contacts lists, to shop, to get our news, to stream entertainment, to go to school, to check our health. We do it for so many different things. And if somebody has access to that device or has access to those accounts, they can monitor our lives, they can gaslight, they can make subtle changes to our lives, they can do so. And I think I don't know about you all, but I don't know what the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning is, but for me, I get on this. That should, and if I could do a show of hands, I would. I mean, I know you kind of can on Zoom, but I'm not going to do it. But I think a lot of us do this. We rely on our smartphones for so many different things. And so you can imagine what a powerful tool that is in the hands of somebody who is perpetrating intimate partner violence. And as we're going to get into, they are uniquely positioned to engage in this form of abuse more so than really any other. So what I keep mentioning, tech-enabled abuse. So what is tech-enabled abuse? I describe it as three things. One, and this sort of goes back to my non-consensual pornography revenge porn example, which is it's not new abuse, right? It's the same abuse, it's just a different wrapper. It's abuse happening on a digital landscape. So now, instead of stalking, it's cyber stalking. Instead of harassment, it's online harassment. Instead of bullying, it's cyber bullying. So, but at the end of the day, the behaviors are the same behaviors we're used to dealing with in our work. It's just people are doing it from anonymous accounts and the like. And so it's not new abuse. And number two, the impact, that's not to say that tech doesn't have an impact on these familiar or traditional forms of abuse, because it makes them easier to commit, right? It removes barriers. Now, instead of having to follow somebody, I can follow them on family sharing, or find my friends, or find my iPhone or something like that, where I don't even have to leave the couch, and it's convenient. It takes virtually no effort for me to do that. It's the factor of opening an app or logging into somebody's account without their consent. Things we do all the time that we don't even think about. It's very easy, and it's accessible. We all have smartphones now, right? So everybody has, and this is really powerful technology, but it's in the hands of basically the entire population. And it's anonymous, as I mentioned. It's very easy to create these fake accounts or fake social media accounts to harass somebody. And the abuse is often invisible. So if somebody, I always preach about we're very good about prioritizing physical safety of victims. We meet them in secure locations, or safe locations, or locked rooms, or places with cameras or security codes. And that's great about physical safety. But what about their digital safety? Are they walking in and out of that meeting being tracked? Are they not safe on their accounts? These are and they may not even know. So, as reliant as we are on these devices, we're really fundamentally pretty unaware of when that technology is misused to harm us. And it's understandable, because it's not like we're getting alerts or suffering bruises or suffering injury or something, very tangible is coming forth when you're harmed online. It's you have to know what to look for as far as red flags, and you have to be aware of your digital footprint and be mindful of your digital safety. So it's easier to commit. And then finally, as I mentioned before, the harm is greater. Let's just take that non-consensual pornography example. If I post a photo online, one, it's very easily repeated. I can just keep posting photos over and over again with very little effort. It's far-reaching. That photo, once it's out there, it can reach a victim anywhere in the world. It's very public. It can cause reputational harm, and it's permanent. As I mentioned, once that photo, you can't scrub the internet from that photo. You can't scrub that photo from the internet. So it's permanent, and it's perpetual. So even if I put one photo up, it can continue to harm over and over and over again, because that victim has to live the rest of their life not knowing when it's going to show up in their social media stream, or for an email or a text message, or on a dating app, or so on and so forth. So that really, I hope, sort of encapsulates the impact of technology on domestic violence or other forms of abuse. Any questions, Julie, before I jump on to the next thing?
I'm not sure if Julie was able to come on. This is Carla.
Okay, Carla.
But I think if we can, before we move on, just have a couple more questions. You answered some of them. There was a lot of concern around schools and universities, and even high schools, preparing students to have like ethics in technology and to address some of these issues. But we did have one question, let me see, and there's a lot, people are asking for the codes, and we're wondering if maybe you can, the laws that protect against deepfakes, are you able to provide that to us? And then we can, yeah. Okay, then we'll share that with everyone. So we
that can just go out. I can add that to the, I can add that as a slide.
Okay.
What you're going to send out to folks.
Oh, wonderful. And then there is one question, other than a person saying it's not them, is there a way to prove it? And this is a person asking in the context of a custody and visitation dispute. Say one parent creates this showing another parent drinking or doing drugs or something.
Yeah, which there's a UK case where somebody they cloned the person's voice to make them appear as abusive on a voicemail. So it's already starting to happen. Let's see.
Is there a way to prove it's not?
Yeah, is there a way to prove it? So yes, as I mentioned, a a lot of money is being spent on detection right now. Right now, there is no technological tool that can 100% detect deepfakes. Facebook did something called the Facebook Detection Challenge, or Deepfake Detection Challenge. And the the winner was able to identify deepfakes, I think at like an 80% or 82% success rate. And then when they started filtering in organic traffic, so not just data sets from the challenge, and actually put what internet data in there, their success rate went down to about 60 in the 60th percentile. So one, not great tech solutions out there. Two, yes, you can. The technology isn't always perfect, so you really want to look closely at it and determine whether or not you see any, because it usually goes from the neck up. So if you see any blurs, weird shadows, digital artifacts like double eyebrows or something like that, anything from the naked eye, because sometimes from the naked eye, or if the person is unnaturally staring straight at the camera, that's also an indication, because the algorithm has to work really hard. Every time the person moves their face, they've got to map the shadows and the lighting and track the person's face. And so always looking for something that, is a bit, we call them digital artifacts. Another thing to do is so there was, I don't know if you all remember, but about a year, within the last year, something called a shallow fake of Nancy Pelosi came out, where somebody slowed down an interview that she gave by 25% and published it saying she was drunk or had diminished capacity or was senile, because it sounded like she was slurring her words. And that was really low tech. It was shared millions of times. The president retweeted it. And the way they debunked that quickly is they took the original video and compared it and set the record straight. So if there's an underlying video, that can be, if there's pornography or someone's being shown to be violent or drunk or something like that, if you can get your hands on that underlying video, that would be great. And then finally, and this is just something I tell judges all the time, or whoever's dealing with this, if audio or video evidence is coming in and it strikes you as, okay, is this manipulated? Is this fake? Is this a deep fake? Is this an audio clone? Is this an audio deep fake or something like that? Then you want to start looking at the source. Okay, so like if it's a voicemail, all right, show me the phone records that will track what the length of time the voicemail was left. Where does the file come from? Show me chain of custody. Show me the fact that that was immediately downloaded from the phone. Is it a weird file? Is it an audio file that is it too large of an audio file because it's been manipulated that when compared with a normal size file? And same with video. Is it too long? And where was it shot? And can you place the victim there? So that's all low tech stuff but we're so conditioned to believe audio, that hearing is believing and seeing is believing, that we tend not to dig that deep if we have, surveillance camera footage. But we need to start looking deeper, because hearing is no longer believing and seeing is no longer believing. And so that, I hope that answers your question. I think that those are the different ways, and be prepared for, be prepared. I do a lot of these trainings and people have never heard of deepfakes. I'm talking about, law enforcement, judges. I've done them all over the country. And I would say 75% of the audience has never heard of them before. So another thing that you may end up having to do is advocate or educate the institution that the victim's going to about that this technology absolutely that exists, because we really run the risk of re-traumatizing victims if they go, and this happened in India actually, where a journalist was the subject of deepfake pornographic attack, and law enforcement didn't believe her, and because they were unaware that technology exists, and so it runs the risk of sort of institutional re-traumatization, which we really want to avoid, and really want to raise awareness around that. Looks like we have, if we haven't, Carla, any other questions before I move on?
We can move on, Adam.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure, no problem. Just to, I guess, put in context the effect that technology has on these cases, I just want to talk about this is a case that's sort of one that has always stuck in my mind. So long story short, the victim was in a contentious divorce. There were nude photos that were taken of her during the relationship. Husband threatened to, so this is basically a sextortion case. The husband was threatening to disseminate these photos if she didn't agree to certain things in the divorce, and gave her a drop dead date to do it. And as a result, she was intimidated, but she didn't give in. And what happened next was the deadline came, and the next morning she went out and she opened her door, and there was a pile of photographs, of nude photographs of her on her doorstep. And they had her name and her phone number. And then she looked out, and every car in the apartment complex parking lot and all the cars on the street had these photos behind under their windshield wipers, right? And so it was early enough, so she felt like she got them all. And so this is still, offline abuse. This is not tech abuse. But then she started getting emails and text messages. Is this you? Hey, saying horrible, lewd things to her. And as soon as those things went digital, those flyers and those photos were uploaded or scanned, or photos were taken of them. As soon as it completely changed the dynamic, right, of what she could do to stop it, the severity of the abuse. And so as soon as abuse goes digital, I'm not saying I think in this case it was worse, but I'm not saying that online abuse is worse than offline abuse or real life abuse, or whatever you want to call it. I'm just saying that it's different, and we should really be aware of the impacts of these things that technology has on the abuse that we contend with all the time. But tech, as soon as it goes digital, it just takes on a life of its own. So let's talk a little bit about the evolving landscape of tech-enabled abuse. And these are all pre-pandemic stats. So, and I'm going to run through these pretty quickly, but the National Network to End Domestic Violence reported that 97% of domestic violence organizations report that perpetrators use technology to abuse. The National Domestic Violence Hotline came out with their most recent annual report, which came out this year, so it was for the year prior. And the year prior, they had seen a 101% increase in digital abuse calls to the hotline. I have to imagine it's going to be much higher next year when they review the pandemic stats. Again, I think these stats are higher now, but according to the Pew Research Center, 81% of US adults are online daily, and 94% of adults ages 18 to 49 have a smartphone. So this makes sense, right? This just sort of goes to what I was saying before about, we're on our devices, victims are on their devices, so it makes sense that that's where they're being harmed. It doesn't just extend to domestic violence. Human trafficking, 75% of underage victims report being advertised online. As I mentioned, 1 in 12 Americans identifies as a victim of revenge porn. 41% of women report experiencing online sexual harassment. The FBI cybercrime report comes out every year, and every year the #1 targeted age group for cybercrime are those 60 and above. Now I know elder abuse is 65 and above, but I think that's very telling because people who are idle and have assets and are online make great targets. As I mentioned before, 59% or almost 6 in 10 teens report experiencing cyberbullying now. And the Third Way think tank came out with a report that said that less than 1% of malicious cyber incidents see an enforcement action. So it's sort of a dangerous status quo that we have right now, where you have, online abuse and tech-enabled abuse spiking, but accountability of the people holding those accountable is less than 1%. So that really puts, the onus on us to, whether you're in law enforcement or social work or nonprofit or what have you, to really be tech savvy in the work that you're doing. 46% of respondents to a survey admitted to engaging in online stalking behaviors, like checking somebody's search history without their consent or their phone without their consent. As I mentioned, 98% of all deepfakes are pornographic targeting women. A study came out of the University of Illinois that 34% of female undergraduate students reported cyber harassment. And the UN Women reports that 75% of women and girls globally experience cyber violence. So hopefully this really sets the stage that we've got a problem here. And 87%, according to a survey by the National Network to End Domestic Violence, 87% of DV professionals don't feel totally confident in addressing online abuse. And as I mentioned before, less than 1% see an enforcement action. So we really have, we're we're in a space where we really need to be comfortable taking action on these things, because this really puts the onus on us to address tech-enabled abuse, especially now during the pandemic. And as I mentioned, these are all stats, pre-pandemic stats. So I think they're going to be much worse when I'm doing this presentation this time next year, as far as the stats that are available. So 2 emerging trends from the pandemic landscape. One, a lot of device and account sharing, which is extremely problematic because, as I mentioned before, all the different things we use our smartphones for is an amazing opportunity for somebody to engage in a variety of the different forms of abuse that I'm going to provide, that we're going to go into in a second. But it's just everybody's sheltering in place together, they're quarantining together. And so it's not unusual to share device, and that we're seeing this more and more. And as a result, it gives somebody really a lot of power to monitor their partner or gaslight that, digitally gaslight them, or make changes to their accounts and different things like that. And access to a person's phone. This is from Ava Galperin from the Electronic Frontier Foundation in San Francisco. She did a great TED Talk on stalkerware, and she said that full access to a person's phone is the next best thing to full access to a person's mind. And when you think about it, we have more personal information on our devices than we do in our homes. And so it puts us at extreme risk, especially when someone's out there, someone close to us is trying to harm us, as is the case with intimate partner violence. And I already sort of alluded to this, but then we have these emboldened attacks that because, and I have some theories, but like for example, this whole thing around straight up asking for nudes from other students, sort of the sexualization of women has become a bit normalized, I think. One, because sexting is happening a lot more during the pandemic. Online sexualized interaction is happening a lot more during the pandemic. There's a lack of accountability for people that are engaging in this type of behavior. And then you even have, women and men that are going on to sites like OnlyFans, where they're starting their own accounts and people pay them for sexualized content. And this is because people need to make ends meet. Or pay for school, or do a variety of different things. So for some, this has created a status quo where it's okay to sexually harass somebody or solicit nudes from them or do a variety of other things. So these are just, and this is that sort of that troll effect that I was talking about. It wouldn't have happened in a in-person setting in a classroom, but because this is all we've gone digital and virtual for everything, people are starting to engage in these types of behaviors. So as I mentioned, I want us to be able to anticipate and predict tech-enabled abuse. We can all do that by asking one question whenever we're dealing with any kind of new or existing technology. And it's, how can this technology, or how can this app, dating site, smartphone, device, location tracker, smart home, software update, new technology, how can this technology be misused to harm victims, or monitor them, or control them, or harass, or sextort, or threaten, humiliate, intimidate, impersonate, spread rumors about them, locate them, or otherwise abuse them? That's the question we need to be asking. If you see somebody you're working with and they're on Instagram, immediately start thinking about, okay, how is it this person saying they're getting stalked? Have they by probably somebody that they know? Okay, have they updated their password? Is somebody else logged into their account right now? Is their profile public or private? Are they getting direct messages? Immediately start thinking about, is Instagram one of the weapons that's being used to engage in this cyber stalking behavior? And when we do that, then we start to think about how we can remedy it or prevent it. Because even if it's not happening, mentioning to somebody, well, you might, have you gone into your settings to see who's logged into your account? Or have you updated your password lately? Or did you ever let your ex-partner go on your phone? Or did you ever log into your Instagram account on their phone or their devices? Because if they did, then it's very likely that the password was saved, and now that person can log into their account with total freedom. So, and this is not expert level stuff. This is just us taking the knowledge that we already have about technology and apps and the internet and passwords, and looking at it in a different way, and alerting victims to these things. Because I've seen it enough that it's a massive issue that we just don't bring up enough because we're often focused on other things. So to give you an example of how you can apply this, in the pandemic, in the beginning of the pandemic, Bumble, which is a dating app, which is designed by women for women, so women have to make the first move, and so men can't reach out to them. But Bumble did two things in response to the pandemic, and I immediately asked the question: how can these two new functions be misused to harm the folks that I work with? One is it created a virtual dating feature where you can now have video dates on the app, whereas previously the only way you could communicate with somebody was through the messaging app on the messaging platform on the app, and you didn't have to give up any identifying information. The other thing they did is they took the geographical restrictions off. So it used to be that you could only date somebody within a 25 or 50 mile radius of where you lived. And they said, well, now you can date anywhere in the country. And I immediately saw problems with this. And so normally we just probably don't have the time to do this, but I want you to all be thinking about, okay, how can this video date, what can go wrong with this video dating feature? Or what can go wrong with this new, taking the restrictions off, the geographical restrictions off. So let's start with video dating. So the video dating feature comes out, and I'm immediately concerned about three things. One, privacy violations. Now people, where it used to be just a text message conversation, or maybe it was a date, but the date happened at a coffee shop or a bar or a restaurant. Now you're letting somebody you barely know into your home, where they can see things about you, they can see where you live, they can learn personal information about you. And by the way, people were incentivized by Bumble, and I'm not dunking on Bumble, but this is another thing that I wish they would have, and maybe they did, but think about the ethical considerations and the misuse implications, because they incentivize people to add a virtual dating badge to their profiles by offering to make a donation into a COVID relief fund if they did it. And so there was some societal pressure to do this, but I think that puts primarily women, but also men, in a dangerous situation where now they're pressured. This is number two. Now they're sort of pressured to engage in a form of communication with somebody they don't know that well, that didn't exist before. And so that puts them in an otherwise dangerous situation, potentially dangerous situation. And then three, the likelihood of nudes, whether unwanted nudes, somebody exposing themselves on a video date, or requesting them, or engaging in sexual behavior, that online sexual behavior, which I don't have a problem with, but then you can screen record the whole interaction. You can take screenshots of the whole interaction. So I'm immediately thinking about these things, and I'm immediately updating my presentations when I'm going to college campuses to talk about this kind of stuff, because we need to be thinking about it. You don't need me to come tell you about it. These are the types of things that we should be thinking about straight away. And then the geographical restrictions. So now you have nationwide range, and maybe some of you thought of these, maybe you saw ones that I didn't think of, but one, misuse application. So now there's increased access for an abusive partner to monitor, impersonate, and harass an ex-partner or a current or former partner that they're abusing, because now from New York, I can potentially show up as a dating option, and which can be scary for my ex-partner, or I can impersonate somebody from far away and engage with them, so I can do it, or I can monitor them, so things I can do from far away that I wasn't able to do before. Trafficking concerns, okay? This is, I think, a gold mine for for young folks to be trafficked, because now you can do it from anywhere in the world. And I think Tinder actually has a global geographic range. So I think this is an absolute gold mine for sex trafficking and human trafficking. And then finally, jurisdictional issues. Now, if you can do this stuff to somebody from far away, we all know once you start getting it crossing state lines, it just becomes that much harder of a case to deal with from the victim's standpoint, and from whoever's investigating it and whoever's prosecuting it, or whatever, or whether it's a restraining order, a variety of different things. You have multiple law enforcement agencies involved. It just gets more complicated. So those are the things that are, so I guess you could say I was less excited about these things. Not that I was using Bumble, but I'm much less excited about the functionality than I think a lot of folks are. And I know we have some questions, but I've got a lot to get through and not a ton of time. So but I will leave some room for questions at the end. Let's just kind of get through some of these common forms of unhealthy or abusive tech-enabled behavior. As I mentioned before, accessing accounts and devices without consent. And you'll notice I don't say hacking. I don't like that word, all right? I mean, it has its place, not typically in intimate partner violence. When somebody goes into a judge to get a restraining order and says, yeah, my ex hacked my Gmail or hacked my Instagram, hacked can mean a variety of different things to somebody. And you don't want there to be miscommunication with the judge or law enforcement or whoever, where they're looking at the respondent being like, there's no way the respondent has the skill set to hack into somebody's account. But it's not hacking. It's just, oh, they left their computer on and I logged into it. Or, oh, the victim used to log into her Instagram account on my phone, on my app, and so I can just log in whenever I want. So it's accessing accounts and devices without consent. That can look at a variety of different things. You can do that to monitor their activity, monitor their emails, monitor their calendar. You can make account changes. You can block them out of their accounts. You can steal information. You can steal money if you're getting into Venmo or PayPal or credit cards or loans or banking or anything. I mean, the amount of online financial activity, I mean, I'm already working on a whole course around online economic abuse because like we do it, you know, even like Bitcoin, which, okay, that's probably a stretch, but you just look at all the different ways that online financial activity is occurring. And that's where economic abuse, that's where financial abuse is going to be occurring as well. I'm going to get through these common forms of abuse, then I'll take a couple questions because I saw some come in. Location tracking is another big one. Our accounts are, you can follow someone's calendar, you can see what they're deciding to do by monitoring their emails or their messages, or app tracking, where it's, and I'm not just talking about find my friends or family sharing, which I've seen a lot of, but I'm also talking about, let's say a victim moves to signs up for Safe at Home, which is the state's confidential address program, and gets a PO box in Sacramento where all their mail goes. And they were in a shelter, and then they get into a confidential a new apartment that's totally unknown to their ex-partner. And then that person finds out where they live. And I'm not pulling these out of this thin air. I've seen these cases where they used a rideshare app to and from someplace, and they were able to and that person had access to the rideshare app. Because, for example, with Uber, I can access Uber online, off my desktop or off my laptop. You don't just have to access it through the app. Or Uber will send receipts to your email. So I have access to your email now. If I'm looking through your emails, I can see a Uber receipt and I can see where you're going to and from, right? Or maybe you're getting food delivery service somewhere. So just appreciating the scope of the digital footprint and encouraging survivors and victims to secure those accounts after they get out of abusive relationships is really critical. And then device tracking. Find my phone. If I have access to your iCloud account, I can use find my iPhone, or find my phone if you're using an Android phone to determine your location as well. Unwanted contact, I'm sure we can all relate to this one, whether it's social media, and it's not just messages, it could be comments on a social media account or a post. Tagging somebody on social media so you get an alert that your ex-partner tagged you, or unwanted friend requests, and then you get into unwanted messages, whether it's text messaging or WhatsApp or direct messaging on social media, and then unwanted and harassing phone calls as well. And again, I said harassing and I didn't mean to. I try to stay away from harassing and things like that because it's a term of art, and I really want to, because people can get their wires crossed when they're talking about tech-enabled abuse, I really try to distill it down to the actions and not some conclusory term that might be a technical term of art. Impersonation is a huge one, and it really works out in two different ways. One, hijacking a victim's devices and accounts. So I worked on a case where, hey, prove to me that you're not cheating on me. Let me look at your phone. And then this person got into the victim's phone and started texting their ex-partners, pretending to be the victim, to basically ferret out whether there was, whether they were being unfaithful to them. And then what that did was that triggered interactions with these ex-partners, some of whom were abusive ex-partners, and they started harassing the victim. So then the victim had multiple people harassing them. So hijacking a victim's device accounts or creating fake accounts. There's no ID check if you want to create an email or a social media account in somebody else's name. You know, and so it's very easy to do, which is what, and cause reputational harm or make it appear as if the victim is posting nude photos of themselves and things like that. So fake accounts on a variety of different platforms is something that's just, it's easy to do. And so therefore it's done quite a bit. Really quickly, I know I keep saying really quickly, but what if you're working with somebody who says, there's a listening device in my home, or there's a spy camera in my home. I know it. Oftentimes we're, at least, I don't know about you all, maybe you have a different experience, but historically for me, it's like, well, what do I do with this? Like, how do I tell them, how do I help them? Or, you know, and I think it's a lot of folks are very quick to say, well, yeah, they're probably paranoid, which is, you know, yes, they may be paranoid, okay, but they may be paranoid for good reason, or there may be something going on. So I'm going to tell you how you can actually really provide value to somebody who thinks there's a listening device or a spy cam in their home. So here's the thing with spy cameras or listening devices. First of all, it is unlikely. It's unlikely that there's something. So if someone says, yeah, they're listening to my conversations, I would look at, you know, whether or not their phone, your iCloud account is compromised and their text messages are being monitored, or their email, before I conclude there's a listening device in the home. But two things I know to be true after talking to experts in the field. One, the device is not some James Bond level spy device. It's something that's likely using Wi-Fi and is plugged into and is using power in the home. So how can we help somebody in that circumstance, or empower them to engage in safety planning at home to make their home safe? Download this app. This is an app that a lot of cybersecurity professionals use. It's an app that will tell you when you're logged into your home Wi-Fi, it'll tell you every device that is logged into your Wi-Fi. That's great if you're staying in an Airbnb and want to make sure there's not some wonky device logged in there, but it's Fing, F-I-N-G. I did this presentation for a bunch of university students, and of course they downloaded it and used it during the presentation, and one kid had like 26 devices on his Wi-Fi, and he lived with one roommate. So clearly people were stealing his Wi-Fi. But it's all invisible. As I mentioned before, tech-enabled abuse is invisible, but it surrounds us. So we should have some tools to be able to use to see what's going on. And this is a really great one. Fing is a great app. It's free. And so when you download it and you use it, this is what it looked like when I did it in my home. And it showed 5 devices. The bottom 4, iPhone, MacBook, Apple TV, and HP OfficeJet Pro, all were familiar to me. And then the top one, I didn't know what it was, so I Googled it, and it was the wireless router provided by my cable internet company. So I was able to conclude that there were no strange devices in the home that were concerning. So this is just a way that we can be empowered in our work, or even in our own lives, to make sure that our home environments are safe. So tech-enabled abuse is clearly a growing problem, and yet 87% of DV professionals don't feel totally confident in addressing it. So why is that? Is it because we're not tech savvy? I would beg to differ. I don't think that that's true. I think that if I gave this list to everybody on this presentation today and said, all right, check the ones you've used or are familiar with, you check all of them. The internet, search engines, email, texting, social media, Wi-Fi, smartphones, passwords, computers, location-based apps, other kinds of apps. You know what these are. You use these in your life every day. These are the things that are being misused to harm victims of domestic violence. So you don't need to be an expert. We're already tech savvy enough. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly, but this is an exercise. I'm going to do one of them. I'm going to use, remember how before I said, you can actually, if somebody comes to you and says, I think somebody's hacked my Instagram, you can help them figure that out. So if you have Instagram on your phone, we've got 15 minutes left in the presentation. Let's just do this. So if you have Instagram, pull up your Instagram account really quick on your device. And I'm going to show you how to do this really quick. If you're working with somebody who is convinced that their phone is hacked, I'm going to show you how you can do this. So go ahead and open, let me see what my next slide looks like. And this really underscores that tech-enabled abuse does not need to be sophisticated to be dangerous. So let me see here. Okay. So go ahead and open your, we're going to do this using your tech savvy skill sets, right? Open Instagram, and then at the bottom right-hand corner, click your profile photo. It's in a little circle. Go ahead and click that. I miss doing live presentations when I can see everybody's following along. Hit the top. There's 3 horizontal lines in the upper right-hand corner. Go ahead and tap that, and that'll bring up your settings menu. Tap settings at the top of that menu. And when you're in this next menu, right down in the middle, you're going to hit security. Tap security. And then hit login activity. And if you don't have Instagram or didn't bring it up, I'm going to show you what this is going to look like. Hit login activity, and it'll show you every device that is currently logged into that Instagram account. And might even ask you, as it did here, hey, was this you, this MacBook from Los Angeles on April 17th, 2:07 p.m.? Was that you that logged in? So if there's a device that matches the device of the person, the respondent in a domestic violence restraining order case, for example, and it's coming from the city that they reside in, that's powerful evidence. Now, one, you can confirm or you can verify alleged abuse for the victim themselves. You can screenshot this and potentially use it as evidence because I think judges, instead of saying, well, how do I know it's this person logging into your account? Well, now you can show them, look, I can't prove it to you. I can't prove, this isn't smoking gun evidence, but this is a case where we're talking about the preponderance of the evidence standard. So this is just evidence that a judge can use to, meet that threshold, that preponderance of the evidence threshold, and gives us an ability to actually say, well, we're not just, out of luck if the abuse has gone digital. We can actually use the setting, and they don't make it easy to find, but, I am assuming you all followed along with me and were able to do this without much trouble. And we can do this for survivors. This is the kind of stuff I'm really passionate about training on, because I just feel like we should all have this level of tech savvy expertise, which I shouldn't even use expertise, just this ability to navigate settings to help victims feel safer and verify allegations of abuse. I'm going to skip this one. So if we are tech savvy enough, is it that perpetrators are more tech savvy than we are? To answer that question, you need to understand the 3 reasons why domestic violence victims are at extreme risk of being harmed via technology. The first is their personal connection. This isn't some stranger in Russia or China or wherever trying to target somebody, the victim, at random. This is somebody who knows them, who has a personal connection to them and wants to harm them. And that's dangerous because they don't need hacking skills, just opportunity. As I mentioned before, if my ex-partner used to log in to their Amazon account on my laptop and they saved the password, well, not only is the password saved, but Amazon views my laptop as a safe laptop. So if I'm wondering where they live or what they're shopping for, and I just type in their email and it autofills the password, I log in, hackers would be offended, I think, if you called that hacking. You just need opportunity. So it puts people that don't have any level of sophistication or expertise in a position to do things that, third-party hackers, usually only third-party hackers can do. And then finally, they have or had the victim's trust. And when you have their trust, that gives you access to passwords, to their devices, to details about their personal life, to answer password reset questions. So when you put all these 3 things together, you start to see, yeesh, yeah, they're at extremely high risk of tech-enabled abuse. And it's not that these people that are doing this are more tech savvy than we are. They're just using, they're able to do it based on the three reasons I just described. And for us, for professionals working with victims of DV, that's good news, because if they're not experts, then we don't have to be experts to act when a victim is being harmed online or via technology, as I just sort of illustrated with the Instagram example, right? Like I'm not an expert. I'm an attorney who was not self-described as tech savvy. I just made a commitment to becoming tech savvy in our work. And I would argue that I don't think we can do our work. I don't think we can fully serve survivors of domestic violence without sprinkling a little tech savviness into our work, because their lives are digital now. and the things that we're doing, the way we live our lives are digital. So, you know, the reason I think it's 87% of folks, it's not that we're less tech savvy or perpetrators are more tech savvy. It's that it's a combination of things. The abuse is invisible. There are enforceability issues with online abuse. The perpetrators are often anonymous. It's hard to hold the perpetrators accountable. There's a lack of training, which is why I started NTAB a year ago, and the limited resources, right, to suss out whether somebody is behind an online attack or accessing somebody's device without their consent. So we are tech savvy. We do have domestic violence expertise. We just need a playbook to address these types of things. So I'm going to quickly go through some really straightforward safety planning interventions that we can take. One is updating passwords. You might be like, yeah, dude, no kidding. Great presentation. But I'm telling you, we all practice really poor password hygiene, and that's troublesome because the passwords are the keys to our digital lives. They're easy to steal. And if you're working with a DV survivor, you should assume they're compromised, because if they are, it exposes them to a full spectrum of online harm, all the different forms of impersonation, harassment, unwanted contact, all those things are in play if a password is compromised. You know, and I'm going to use this example as an example. This woman was part of a data breach for like a Hilton account or something like that. And people got a hold of her login credentials, and because she used the same password across multiple accounts, they were able to log into her home security account. It was a Ring security system. They started watching her baby, and then one day they started threatening her, threatening to kill her dog, hurling racial slurs at her. And the reason that they were able to log in is because she reused this, they gained access to a password that she reused and reused and reused, which makes sense because the average person has 90 online accounts and 80 apps. That's 170 passwords we have to keep track of. So no, and we were all being honest, and I asked y'all, I bet a lot of you reuse your passwords. That's extremely dangerous. So if we have 170, really quick, write this website down if you don't already know it. haveibeenpwned.com. And you're going to get these in the slides. So actually you don't have to write it down. But this is a website that if you enter your email address, it will tell you how many data breaches, all the different accounts that have suffered data breaches where that email was associated. So for example, when I did it, so instead of have I been owned, it's have I been pwned with a P. And when I did it, it said at the top here, oh no, you've been pwned on 13 breach sites. And the first one was Cafe Press. And I was like, I have a Cafe Press account, but we don't remember a lot of the accounts we have. But if we're using the same, that gives somebody access, as you can see here, compromised data, email address, name, password, phone number, my physical address. So this goes beyond domestic violence and is really just a great way to determine whether or not your email has been compromised. So what do we do? For those, try to look up password managers. Password managers are apps or accounts that basically create unbreakable passwords in a vault that autofill for you, and you just have to remember one really powerful password. And that way you can use unique passwords across every site. And you can, LastPass is a free one that's really good. 1Password is a really popular one as well. So LastPass or 1Password. If you're gonna go the old school way and remember your passwords, I suggest phrases or sentences that are from songs or books or poetry or whatever you're into, or TV show, using the punctuation, commas, spaces, periods, everything, capitalization. So easy to remember, but it's super long and hard to break. And stay away from those that are personally relevant to you. That's where they get you. Two-factor authentication. For those of you that don't know what two-factor authentication is, it's an extra security feature on your account. So when somebody has your password and they try to log into your account from a device that they don't recognize, they'll say, hey, Adam, you're logging in from a new device. You're using the right password. We're going to text a code to your phone, enter it, and then we'll let you in. So normally that's really safe, but for intimate partner violence, there's a lot of loopholes here, because you could turn on text message forwarding, you could edit the contact information, so those codes are going to the abusive party and not to the victim. So having two-factor authentication on is really important. But you also, and if you're ever trying to explain this to somebody, you say, look, you use two-factor authentication all the time. If you go to the ATM, it's two-factor, two-step verification. You have to use your PIN code and you have to use your ATM card. With just one, you cannot get any money out. So we use two-factor authentication all the time. And then you want to make sure to remove trusted or safe devices. So as I mentioned, if my girlfriend used to log into her Amazon account on my laptop, my account is safe. So it's very straightforward to go into Gmail or really any account and just look up Google or look up, because it's different for every account, you know, how to locate trusted or safe devices on Amazon or Apple or Google or what have you. And then you can clear them out. That's also a huge security risk, as I mentioned, because people aren't going to get prompted for a two-factor authentication code if they try to log in. I'm going to skip this example. And then finally, as I mentioned, you want to verify contact information, right? Because if it's edited, then security notifications or two-factor authentication alerts are going not to the victim, but to somebody else. Here's how you do it on an iPhone. So you hit settings and you click your name up here at the top, and that takes you to your Apple ID page. And then you just click name, phone number, and email and just verify it. I've just worked on a number of cases where that has been altered and people are able to reset passwords or do things remote or turn off phones remotely, or factory reset phones remotely by resetting their iCloud password and then logging into their iCloud and saying, hey, I lost my phone. I need to factory reset it so nobody gets my information. And then it wipes text messages and photos of injuries and a ton of different stuff. Okay, 2 minutes. I know we normally leave more time for questions, but because we were answering questions during, we got a little hung up, but I'd love to take some questions now. And you can email me, adam@ntab.org, if you have further questions that I can answer, or you're interested in a training or whatever. And on social media, I'm at Adam R. Dodge, where I post about this stuff quite a bit.
Adam, if you take your phone or your child's phone to a store like Verizon or Apple.
Sorry, I'm having a little trouble hearing you. Can you?
Sure, Adam. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, go for it.
Maybe I'll hop in if you can hear me.
Okay. Yeah, Carla, I can hear you.
Okay, great. So I think the question Julie was talking about is if you take your phone or child's phone to Verizon store, for example, or Apple store, will they be able to detect if an ex-spouse has enabled tracking or other access to your information, or is there another specialist that you need to reach out to detect this?
Yeah, the Apple Store, Verizon, no. The truth is that to a degree, they'll be able to verify whether something's on there, but stalkerware or spyware is sophisticated enough that, and this, I will say this, iPhones, really hard to put stalkerware on there. So I wouldn't worry so much about iPhones, but Android phones, because you can download apps outside the Google Play Store, they're a hotbed for stalkerware. And I wouldn't, they're not going to do any kind of digital forensics on your device. What they're going to do is they're going to say, look in your, go to the settings where all the purchase settings or the download settings to see what apps have been downloaded onto the phone. Look in your location settings to see what apps are using your location and make sure you recognize all of them. Go to your battery settings and look at which apps are using battery and make sure you recognize all of them. Even if it looks like it should be there, like it says system settings, if you didn't put it there or download it or it wasn't on your phone when you bought your phone, then it's likely spyware. You can do that without going into a Verizon store or anything like that. But ultimately, these apps, these spyware, stalkerware apps, they can hide in a way that you would need some kind of digital forensics from like a cybersecurity firm to help you with that.
Thank you. I think we might have time for one more question or so.
Okay.
We have a ton of questions, so I think people will be reaching out to you.
I would love, what I can also do is I can try to answer them offline and then put those answers in the slides.
That's great. We'll send you all the questions. And one of the last questions, do you have a list of tech experts that can testify competently in California courts regarding audio video that has been altered?
Well, I do know quite a few cybersecurity experts that work on more like corporate, espionage, cybersecurity, state actor cybersecurity attacks and things like that. But I can float that around if they do expert testimony on these types of things and see if they do. So I'm happy to look into that for sure.
Okay. Let's see. I don't know if Rachel wants to come back in or not, but we are at our time and we will get you all the questions. There's quite a few on dating apps and vehicle tracking, but we have them all and we'll make sure that you receive them.
I nerd out on that stuff, so you're doing me
good.
I just want to say, Adam, this was so relevant, so pertinent, and more importantly, so interesting. And from one DV attorney to another, thank you for this work and all that you do. And thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And this is an amazing, such a storied conference. So I'm really excited to get to be a part of it. So I really appreciate it. And sorry for the technical difficulties at the beginning.
Well, we'd love to have you back.
Yes. I would love to be back for sure.
All right. Thank you all. And we have more sessions coming. We have one this afternoon. Every Friday in October, we have a 12 hours of strangulation response. That is CEU credits are available. So lots going on all of October. And we thank you so much, Adam, for this wonderful, wonderful presentation.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.